Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I hope you're all having a lovely start to the week. And if you're not, let's try and make it a little lovelier, shall we? I've got a couple of fun things to talk about today. We're going to talk about this little pattern we're going to do today. And I just wanted to let you all know that all of these little mini granny squares, so this is sort of part of our fancy mini collection of granny squares. These are our 6-inch little fancy grannies. There are 5 in the pattern collection so far in our Etsy shop. And today and tomorrow we've got them on sale for 15% off if you fancy picking one up. We are going to make the pumpkin today. So you can also obviously option to turn this into a jack-o'-lantern if you're in a Halloween-y mood. But this makes a really cute pumpkin or apple. It's 6 inches, and I think that 6 or 8 of these all stitched together would make a really cute table runner. So we haven't done a tutorial yet for any of these. These were kind of a little side project I was working on, and we thought it might be fun to bring you guys a live tutorial for the pumpkin today. So we've got our little our little frog, our little sunshine, a little flower, our little teddy bear, and our little pumpkin or jack-o'-lantern. All of them are in the shop. And we're going to make this little guy here today. So these little 6-inch grannies are all designed to kind of fit together. And they're just, I don't know, they're really cute. I got kind of I got carried away and started making lots of suns and flowers because I love the flower in this one. But yeah, anyway, today we're going to do this little square. I'm going to show you how to make it into a pumpkin. The pattern includes turning it into a jack-o'-lantern, but I also wanted to sort of point out that if you made it in green or red, that and maybe added like a little leaf or something, and we do have tutorials for little leaves, you could easily turn it into a little apple if that's kind of something you wanted to add to your autumnal projects. So that's what we're up to today. I'm going to give you what we're using in terms of tools and yarn. I want to take a second and thank Joanne for popping into our shop and buying a pattern just before we got going here. And Nico, Nico's in the house. Thank you, Nico. Nico has just purchased a membership. And thank you so much, Nico. And let's see here. Janice has won it. Congratulations, Janice. All right, so Mr. InStitches is also in the house. We'll see if his microphone's working today. I've got a cup of coffee.
Hello.
And it's a cozy kind of day. I would definitely want to stay in. It's definitely autumn styling weather out there. It's kind of damp. It's cold. Actually, I don't know if it's cold. It's definitely cool. It's kind of blustery. Very autumnal. So definitely a stay in and crochet sort of day. Let's talk about the things you're going to need in order to make one of these little fancy granny squares. All of the little fancy granny squares use the same amounts of yarn. The colors vary, and sometimes you need the little scrap amounts for the extra bits, like if you were going to add on the little bits that make him into a jack-o'-lantern. You need like about a half a yard for his little stem. And like I say, if you were going to turn this into an apple, then you'd need even less because you really don't even need that much of a stem for your apple. But the pumpkin needs about a little bit less than half a meter or so. You need around 10 yards for your orange, your green, and your white. So very small amounts of yarn to turn this into a little 6-inch granny. You need a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and I'm using a 5.5mm hook. It's also known as an eye or a 9. I really love this size to make granny squares with. I'm also using acrylic yarn, which of course you can use cotton or wool or blends, whatever you like. Specifically though, size 4 medium weight. I'm going to be using an orange today that is technically considered a size 5, but it really is about the same size as the rest of my size 4. So I'll be using this. It's technically a chunky weight, but it's really not. It's such a thin chunky that I can use it alongside my other size 4s. So here we go. That's our little square, our little template. I'm going to put my scissors and my needle aside, grab my hook. I'm going to put all of my yarn kind of out of the way so I'm not bumping it with my elbows. I've got a little bit of green, I've got some orange, I've got brown, I've got white, I've got a little bit of black in case I get to it. And here we go. Joanna has just picked up another pattern. Thank you so much, Joanna. It's a happy little crafty morning here. Okay, if any of you did our 2017 calendar blanket along with us and you tried any of the 12-inch fancy grannies, then you're going to be familiar with the first 2 rows of this pattern. Very, very simple. I like to start with a cinch circle. Now I know a lot of you have trouble with the cinch circle. We have a very mini tutorial on how to make it on the table in case you find that easier. So this is sort of how I would make a cinch circle if I had trouble doing it in my hands. You kind of take your yarn, you create a little loop, you take your hook and pass your hook through it, grab the other yarn and pick it up, and then you can just kind of flatten it all down on the table, maybe give yourself a little bit of tension. Then you can pick it up and you can just chain 1. And that's how you make a cinch circle. It doesn't matter how big your cinch circle starts out, whether it's like large because you sort of had trouble finagling it. Just make sure that you get down to a nice tight little cinch, like a tight, I should say, chain 1, and you're good. You can always cinch that circle shut, so it doesn't matter if it starts out large. So don't be intimidated by the cinch circle because it is an absolutely fantastic technique. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Bee Hands has just picked up a pattern at her Etsy shop. Thank you. This is a great way to start out a lot of granny squares that have that if you want a solid middle, like you don't want that open sort of space that a chained ring creates. And when I'm making a fancy granny square or anything that starts circular, but I don't want the middle to have an opening, I always start with a cinch circle. So I highly recommend getting comfortable with that technique. It's really not that difficult or scary. And you can use it for so many things. All right, so that's our cinch circle. The chain 1 that secures it counts as one of the 3 chains that we want to start with. So I'm going to chain 2 more. That chain 3 will count as a double crochet for round 1. And into our cinch circle, working over top of that little tail, which is very important. You want to work over top of the tail because that's how you cinch it all shut. We're going to double crochet 11 times. So the chain 3 counts as a double crochet. We're going to double crochet into that circle over top of that little short tail 11 more times, and we'll have technically 12 stitches at the end of row 1. And it's easy to count double crochets because you can actually just pull your stitches apart and see them. So there's the chain 3, which counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so far. And I'm going to keep going until I can count 12 stitches. Thanks everybody for dropping in, popping in, spending some time with us this morning. I really do like making granny squares of every single kind. They're probably my favorite go-to crochet. Like I want to sit and do a little crochet. I don't know what to do. I'll sit down and do some granny squares. They're just because you can turn them into so many other projects. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 more to go. All right, that is 12 stitches, including the chain 3, all of them double crochets. So 11 double crochets plus the chain 3 equals 12. Take that little short tail and cinch it shut. There we go. And now you have a nice tight middle. There's nothing there to sort of take your attention away from the overall shape of the center of the granny square. No open middle. We are also going to join the row. So we're going to find the top of the chain 3, just stick our hook through it. I'm going to work over top of that short tail and slip stitch to join. So that's row 1 complete. Now for row 2, we're going to do that fun little trick where we chain 3 to begin, but the chain 3 does not end up counting as a double crochet. But I'll explain more of that when we get back around to it. In the same place that we just chained out of, so if you pull up on that, you see that space there, you're going to double crochet right into it. And then 2 double crochet into each stitch all the way around. So there's the next space that we're working into. Sometimes that can look a little funny, so don't miss it. And then you're going to work 2 double crochet into, so after you work double crochet into the same stitch that you chained 3 out of, you work 2 double crochet into the remaining 11 stitches. And we're going for 24. Karen has just picked up 3 patterns at our shop. Thank you so much, Karen. Really appreciate the support.
Amanda asks, hey Jayda, how do you get the motivation to crochet?
How do I get the motivation to crochet?
I have a CBN project I need to do, but I don't have no motivation for it. What is your advice?
If you're looking to try to finish something, oh my goodness, Marie, thank you so much, Marie. Marie's just picked up some patterns at our Etsy shop. If you're trying to find the motivation to crochet because you have to finish a project, you make yourself a little list. So why do you have to finish the project? Is the project for someone? Did you agree to make something for somebody either because it's for a gift or maybe it's a donation to charity or maybe you're selling it? If this is an obligatory crochet project, then you sit down, you make a list of all the reasons that you have to get it done. Make a list of the things that still need to be finished on it. So if it's just, you know, oh, I just need to do 10 more rows, or I need to do all the appliques, or now I have to sew it all together. Make a list of all the things that need to be done. And at the top of that page, put down a deadline because you know you have to have it done by that date. Then you get a calendar page and you break up all of the days between when it needs to be finished and where you are right now. You break up that list of what needs to be done into sections and then maybe even into timed sections. Like I have a half an hour today, I have 2 hours tomorrow. And you do things like set a timer. Okay, I have half an hour to crochet. In this half hour, I will do as much as I can. And you give yourself a little time limit. And it kind of makes it fun. It's like a challenge. Like how much can you get done in 30 minutes? Then you cross off the things on that list as you get them done, because that always makes you feel like you've accomplished something. And accomplishment is an extremely important feeling, especially when you have to get something done. Now, if this is not an obligatory project, it's not something you have to do, it's not something you have to finish, you just got kind of into it because you were initially excited and inspired, but now it's lost some of its glamour, you have 2 options. You can finish it as it is right now. So if you were making a blanket and it's only like halfway done, well, is it a good size for a throw? If you finish your last row and then put a border on it the way it is it like useful for the back of the couch or something? Or if it's really not completed enough, or it's not the kind of project that you can just easily turn into something else, unravel it, put that yarn back into your stash, and just forget about it. So you always have a couple options with a non-obligatory project. But if it is obligatory, then you got to break it up into little challenging, timed pieces. You've got to set some deadlines for yourself. And you've just got to make that list and mark those things off. Keep that list handy. It is really helpful to have it written down because if you physically scratch it off, it'll always make you feel better. When you get all the way back around and you've done 2 double crochet in every single one of those 11 stitches, you'll have what we call the false stitch. Oh my goodness. Christine, thank you so much for picking up a pattern. The little false stitch always sits at the very bottom of the chain 3 or however many chains start a row when you're working in the round and you join your rows with a slip stitch. That little false stitch is created by slip stitching. We chained 3 and double crocheted in the same stitch before we did 2 double crochet in each of those 11 stitches. So if you count up all of your stitches right now, you'll have 22. So what we want to do are actually, I should say, we'll have 24, including that double crochet, or the chain 3, but we don't want to use the chain 3 as a double crochet, and I'll explain why in a second. So you've got the chain 3 and a double crochet in the same place, plus 2 double crochet in each of the other 11 stitches. So technically that's 24. So we do this. Into that false stitch, we double crochet. And now you have 25. We skip over top of that chain 3, find the top of the first real double crochet and slip stitch to join. So that pushes the chain 3 to the back. And now you have a nice, solid, perfect circle with no gaps when you join. So when you're double crocheting in the round and you're joining your rows, this is a really great technique to use because now you have a solid circle and you can't really tell where the chain 3 and the beginning of the circle was because the chain 3 gets pushed to the back. So we're not counting that chain 3 as a stitch, and we have a nice solid circle all the way around. So that's the end of row 2. We've got 24 stitches. We're still using the orange for row 3, so we're still working on our little pumpkin. For row 3, we are not chaining 3 to begin because we're going to start forming an actual pumpkin. So we slip stitch to join, and we are going to double crochet in the same stitch that we joined in, but we're not chaining 3 to begin. So this is, somebody actually asked me the other day, what happens if you don't chain 3 and then just start double crocheting? Well, we've slip stitched to join. We're not going to chain 3. We're just going to double crochet into the same stitch that we joined in. So it's a little tight, but this is what happens.
Big thank you to Crochet with Diane for renewing her membership.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you so much for renewing. And thank you, Barbara. Thank you for picking up some patterns at our Etsy shop. When you double crochet immediately and do not chain 3, your double crochet leans. You can see that slip stitch and then the double crochet, the slip stitch pulls the double crochet down. So the actual top of the stitch is literally facing at almost like a perpendicular angle to the rest of your crochet. In this case, because we want the top of our pumpkin to dip in a little bit, that's why we didn't chain 3 to begin. But if you do need to chain 3, Cappy, thank you so much for picking up a pattern. If you do need to chain 3 and you don't, you're going to end up with a squished double crochet. So something to keep in mind. Okay, for the next 4 stitches, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches here. We're going to actually, I'm sorry, we're going to double crochet into the next stitch. So I forgot we're on row 3. So I'm working across 24 stitches. So we double crocheted into the same place that we slip stitched into. Thank you so much, DLS, for picking up some patterns. Really appreciate it. We've double crocheted into the next stitch. And now we've got 4 sets of 2 stitches that we're going to work across. I know it sounds a little confusing, but it's not. So here we go. Into the next stitch, we're going to double crochet twice. So this is your typical increasing pattern. 2 double crochet into the next stitch, double crochet into the next stitch, because we're working across 24 stitches and we want to eventually get up to a little bit where we would normally increase up to 36, but we're not technically doing that. We're going to do this twice or 3 times more. 2 double crochet, 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, 1 double crochet. So here's 2 more double crochet into the next stitch, double crochet into the stitch after that, and now twice more. 2, 1, 2, 1.
Dawn's birthday is coming up, so happy early birthday to Dawn.
Happy early birthday to Dawn indeed. Okay, so here we are so far for row 3. We slip stitch to join and then did not chain anything extra, double crocheted immediately into that same place that we joined in. Then we double crocheted into the next stitch, and then we started a very familiar looking increase. 2 double crochet, 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, 1 double crochet. Repeated that twice more. That brings us down to almost opposite where we joined. Into the next stitch, we're going to double crochet twice, just as though we were continuing with that regular increase. But instead of double crocheting into the next stitch, we're going to slip stitch into it.
So DLS was Deanna.
Thank you, Deanna.
Big thank you to Deanna for your pattern purchase. We appreciate it.
Cheers, Deanna. Thank you so much. So we slip stitch into that next stitch. Instead of double crocheting, it'll be directly opposite where we slip stitch to join. So half of your row 3 is complete, and you should have what looks like half of the front of a 2-dimensionally drawn pumpkin. So a divot here and a divot down here. That slip stitch kind of counts as what would normally be the double crochet, but is a short stitch instead. That's going to create the divot at the bottom of our pumpkin. And now we're going to do the familiar increasing pattern for the rest. So into the next stitch, we're going to double crochet twice. Again, we're not chaining. We want that divot to sort of stand out. Dizzy D, has gifted a membership. Thank you so much, Dee. And Barb has won it. Congratulations, Barb. Welcome back. So 2 double crochet into the next stitch, double crochet into the next stitch, and then we're going to repeat that pattern. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Basically 5 times all the way up. So we finish with our last 2 double crochet into the next stitch, double crochet into the stitch after that. That'll bring you to the place where you joined the last row. That's the slip stitch. And instead of slip stitching into that same stitch, we're going to slip stitch into the bottom of what was the first double crochet. So you're just sort of skipping over that join. And technically you'll have 36 stitches here, not 24, 36, because your slip stitches count as a stitch. So basically you've got 2 halves of a circle that kind of come together like this.
Happy birthday to all the birthday people that are going to be this month. We have a few in the chat.
Happy birthday to all the birthday babies. We were all babies at some point.
You were all babies many, 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 many years ago.
Yes, all of us, many, many years ago. Okay, so now we've got 36 stitches, including our 2 slip stitches. That's it for the orange. We're going to fasten off, and we can weave in our ends. So I'm just going to take my needle and weave that tail in across the back, just to get it out of my way before we move on to the green part. Christine, thank you so much for picking up a pattern.
We have a busy little shop today.
Yes.
I know why, because the weather outside is poopy.
The weather
So
outside
everyone's indoors.
is definitely
We have
crummy.
pumpkin spice lattes in the shop available, and Jayda made some crumpets. What else did you bake? There's fresh baked goods.
I made brownies and
it
pizza.
smells like Christmas and Halloween and autumn all at the same time.
That sounds good. All the yummy foods. Okay, we are done with the little orange pumpkin-y part of our pumpkin. If you look at the back, that's basically what it looks like. So we finished the pumpkin. Now we're going to move on to creating the green part. So we're going to take our green, we're going to start with a slip knot. And for this row only, we're going to be using back loops only. So let me get my scissors and my yarn needle out of the way. We are going to join our yarn with a back loops only slip stitch in the first double crochet of what was row 3. So that's this guy right over here. And remember that top of that stitch kind of faces in this direction, so it's not always that easy to see. So you want to just wiggle your hook underneath the back loop only of that stitch. There we go. So back loops only, join with a slip stitch. So we've joined with a slip stitch using the back loop only. It's that top of that first double crochet that kind of leans in this direction. And now we're going to chain 3, skip 2 stitches, and back loops only slip stitch into the next stitch. So chain 3, skip the next 2 stitches, and then back loops only, so that's the back loop, slip stitch into the next stitch. So we're creating a little chain 3 space basically that is flat to the side of the pumpkin and just covers a couple of stitches. Chain 3, skip the next 2 stitches, and back loops only, slip stitch into the next stitch.
Dawn has a little tune for us. Can you see it there with the microphones?
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but inside it's so delightful. Since we no place to go, another row, another row, another row. Dawn, I love it. Great motivation.
That's the tune. We're going to play that in the shop.
Yes, I love it.
While everyone's browsing and enjoying a spiced pumpkin spice latte.
Chain 3, skip 2, slip stitch, back loops only into the next stitch. And that will bring you across the first half of your pumpkin, slip stitching into the top of the double crochet that's just before that little slip stitch divot at the bottom of your pumpkin. Remember that you're treating this as a stitch. So when you chain 3, you're skipping over top of that 1, 2, and then back loops only, slip stitching into the next stitch. So back loops only. Just like when we made our heart at the center granny square, we're using the back loops only of this definition row between the pumpkin color and the background color, and it'll help pop the actual image of the pumpkin out of the square. Dawn with a super chat. Thank you so much, Dawn. Good evening to both of you. Hope you're well. Thank you, Dawn. I hope you're well too. It's always a nice day when I get to stay inside, do some crochet, and hang out with the craftiest community on this amazing sphere of ours. Chain 3, skip 2, back loops only, slip stitch into the next stitch. And it'll create these little chain 3s that basically hug the outside of your pumpkin shape, but because we're using the back loops only, you'll have an uninterrupted line of orange all the way around. So you can really see that uninterrupted line of orange, and that's what helps create that pumpkin shape, and it lets it pop out. You're going to have 12 of these little chain 3s all the way around. When you get to the end, you're going to chain 3, skip the last 2 stitches. This is a double crochet. This is a slip stitch. And you're going to join with a slip stitch in the same place that you joined your yarn in. So you're going to find that same little back loop where you joined your yarn originally, slip stitch into the same place. But we're not done with the green. We're going to slip stitch into that space. So here's the chain 3 space. That's the first one we made. I've just slip stitched to join that row, but before I do anything else, I'm going to slip stitch directly into this chain 3 space. So that'll sound familiar to people who do granny square projects with us. I always like to try and start a row when I'm working square in a corner. So here we go. I've just slip stitched into that space. We're not technically doing a corner, but I do want to work into these spaces. We are using the spaces now, not stitches. So we slip stitch into that chain 3 space. We can lay it down flat, and now you can sort of see here's the divot, so that's the top divot, the bottom divot. There's a little chain 3 that runs over top of both of it. It'll lay flat, so those chain 3s just sort of evenly encircle our pumpkin, but because we were using back loops only, you can see that uninterrupted line of orange all the way around really does help to kind of pop it out. That was row 4. We're moving on to row 5 now, and this is where we're going to start creating the square part. So these are the little spaces that we just made, and we are going to start turning it into a square. Now we don't want to start with a corner because we're over here right underneath where this little stem is. So we're going to be starting over here with a regular shell, then we'll be turning into a corner. So here we go. We are already, thank you, Barbara. Barbara's just picked up a pattern. Thank you so much. We're already in this little area, this space. We're going to chain 3. That chain 3 will count as a double crochet in this case. And into this same chain 3 space, we're going to work 2 more double crochets. So that's the first shell of row 5. And I'm not working over my little short tail. I'm just going to weave that in later. You can work over top of it if you want to, but I'm just going to keep it out to the back for now. So just to reiterate, there's the top divot, here's the bottom divot of our little pumpkin, and we've started row 5, which is where we square it up. We're only beginning the row with a single shell or 3 double crochet. Reminder that the chain 3 counts as a double crochet. Chain 1, that's going to give us a little breathing space. Look for the next chain 3 space that we made, and here's where we're going to make our first corner. So 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, your standard granny square corner. And you're working into the space that you created with the chain 3.
Jayda, you make turning a circle into a square so easy. That's from Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie. It's fun. It's nice to see geometry at work. Krista,
Wow,
thank you so
We have a busy
much.
little shop today.
Thank you so much, Krista.
It must be that pumpkin spice.
It's the pumpkin spice.
Yeah.
It gets everybody going.
Or it's the bad weather. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the stay in and crochet feeling. It's very cozy. 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. That creates our first corner. We're going to chain 1. You're looking for the next chain 3 space, and we're going to work 3 double crochet into it. Nico has just gifted another membership. Thank you so much, Nico. And Graybeard has won it. Welcome to the family, Graybeard. 3 double crochet, chain 1. We're going to do it again. So here's the next little chain 3 space, 3 double crochet, chain 1. So you should see, here's your first corner up here. Shell, chain 2 shell, chain 1. Shell, chain 1, shell, chain 1, and now we're going to create another corner. So into the next chain 3 space, we're going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, chain 1. So the chain 2 is what creates the corner for us. Here it is here. 3 more double crochet, that's the first shell along the bottom of our square now. And then chain 1 before you leave. We are now in the little space that runs over top of the bottom divot of our pumpkin. It's a regular 3 double crochet, chain 1, or a single shell. Into the next chain 3 space, another shell, or 3 double crochet. Chain 1. So we're working across the bottom of our pumpkin now, and into the next chain 3 space, it's another corner. 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, chain 1. So that's our third corner. Here's the top of the pumpkin, the bottom of the pumpkin. We started with 1 shell here and then went into a corner. So there's corner number 1, 2 shells, corner number 2, 2 shells, corner number 3. We're going to go shell, chain 1, shell, chain 1, and then another corner, our last corner. So 3 double crochet, chain 1, twice more. And there are lots of ways to turn a circle into a square, but I like this for our little fancy grannies because it kind of helps define the center image. I wanted these to be really cute and to focus on that center image, so I like the added little bits of space around it because it really helps pop out that middle picture. That's 2 shells along the side, chain 1. My last corner, shell, chain 2, shell, chain 1 into this space here. Chain 2 for the corner, 3 more double crochet. Chain 1, and we've got 1 chain 3 space left. We're going to work a regular shell or 3 double crochet into it. And we're almost finished. row 5. Don't forget that last chain 1, and then you're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. That's what began the row. Little slip stitch to join. And that is it for the green or the background. Now, if you wanted it to be just a little bigger, so I've got these sized to be 6 inches in total, but if you wanted a little bit more background and you wanted your square a little bit bigger, you could just continue with the shell stitch for as many rows as you want, technically, but 1 or 2 more rows won't dwarf the center image that much. So if you wanted them to be a little bit bigger, like 8 inches, then you could add a couple more rows of the shell stitch, but I'm only doing 1.
So Crocus's granddaughter liked the Halloween sweater and now wants a matching hat.
Oh!
I think a matching hat for that sweater would be awesome.
That would be really cute.
It's pretty much a full-on costume.
It is. It is. How would we do? Well, I mean, that would be really easy. So you could do a regular hat and add little boo appliques to it. I've done that in the past. So that would tie it in. You could make a granny square hat, which is a lot easier to do than some people think. And then add some little boos to it if you wanted. I think that would be really cute. You could even add a little bee on top as the pom-pom. Just weaving in my little tails across the back here.
We have a membership milestone from Vima.
Vima! Hi, Vima. Vima says, hi, Jayda. So happy to be here. We're happy you're here too, Vima. Love, love, love the pumpkin granny square. Thank you so much for this lovely pattern. Well, thank you very much, Vima. Vima's busy making pumpkins right now too. There we go. Just doubling back, weaving in the last of that little bit of tail. There. Flip it back over. I always like to kind of find my 4 corners and pull them out anytime I'm making a granny square. That just helps square it up, gives me a little bit of shape. I can see my pumpkin now, so my pumpkin's gonna sit just a little bit crooked because it's it's a happy jolly little pumpkin. There's the top, there's the bottom, so it's sitting squared now inside my granny square. If I were going to add a face, I could do that at the end. We're going to add a little stem though, just to turn it into a little pumpkin, a proper pumpkin with a stem. There's other little things you could do. If you made this in green or red or even yellow, you'd have a nice little apple. I'm going to talk about stem options for the apple in a little bit. And of course you could add a little leaf too. And we've got lots and lots and lots of different sized leaf tutorials that we've done over the years here on the channel. So if you just want a little tiny leaf, you could crochet a little leaf. You could embroider a little leaf if you wanted to, or you could just leave it plain. Not every apple has a leaf on it, but that would definitely get across the idea of it being an apple, in which case you could have pumpkins and apples all mixed together for a really cute little table runner, if you're so inclined. All right, we've got 1 more row of our square to add, and it's this little border row. I've used white for mine because I just like the way it stands out, but if you were doing a Halloween inspired project with these, you might want to do this in black or maybe in purple or some kind of Halloween-y color. If you use black, it will really give it that stained glass effect or a really nice rich frame. Black is a really great color, just like white is, to frame up granny squares with, because it really makes all the colors inside the square pop out. But I'm using white today. It's much easier to see. I put my green aside and I'm going to get my white now. So here we go. And take my white, I'm going to start with a slip knot. Now if you were going to use the same color to finish off, let's say you didn't want this bright white or any other different color for your final row of framing, then you would just, after you joined with a slip stitch in the top of the chain 3, you would just slip stitch across these next 2 stitches and into the next chain 1 space, and then start from there. You can do that, or you can just chain 1 and single crochet into the same place that you are right here. It just depends on, you know, how you look at a square. If you're comfortable starting that final row with the same color where you are, if you have trouble seeing it, maybe add a little stitch marker to the top just so you don't miss it, because the single crochet is a very small stitch and it's the first time we've used it now in this project. But I like to start in corner spaces. I just find it It's easier for me. It's a good visual reminder of where I start and where I finish, even if I'm not using an obvious color. So I'm going to start by joining with a slip stitch in a corner space. I just like to do that. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to work 2 single crochet, chain 2, 2 single crochet into this corner space. So I'm just going to pull my little slip stitch right to the corner. I'm going to work over top of my short tail this time because why not? 2 single crochet, chain 2, and 2 single crochet into that corner space. Now I'm going to single crochet into the top of every single stitch and in every single space all the way across. And when you're doing this, so when you're adding just plain stitching to a previous row of granny shell stitch, whenever you're getting ready to leave a corner, pull back on your stitches so that you can see the top of that stitch. I'm going to just mark it with my needle here. It's easy to lose. So that's the top of the stitch right there. You don't want to miss that. It's very easy to completely miss it because if you're crocheting, the last stitch that you work in the corner will sometimes cover the top of that first stitch. And if you miss it, it'll throw off your stitch count. And that's a very common reason that people go, I don't get it. I've counted, I've made sure I put a single crochet in every single stitch. I did the right corners. I bet you it's that you missed this stitch. So don't miss that stitch. Pull your stitches back to sort of expose it and make sure you single crochet into it. And then you won't miss anything. You've got 3 double crochets and chain 1 spaces in between. So if you're in your head and you're kind of counting, you can count 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1. And that way you know you're not missing any of the stitches in the shell and you're not missing the chain 1 spaces. I'm just crocheting right into the space. I'm not bothering to try and stick my hook through that little slip, that little chain. I'm just working right into the space. It's much easier, it's faster. And I'm single crocheting in every single stitch and space all the way down. When I get to the next chain 2 corner, I'm going to do what I did up here. 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. I'm sorry, single crochet, 2 single crochet, chain 2, 2 single crochets. Yeah, I'm using double crochet for the rest of it. So single crochets all the way around row 6. I pull back to make sure I don't miss that stitch. So it's the first stitch of my row here, or the side. And continue single crocheting. Got a little bit of a knot here. I'll make short work of that. Ba-ba. So I'm treating every single corner space the same, 2 single crochet, chain 2, 2 single crochet, and I'm continuing to single crochet in every single stitch and space all the way across while fighting little miniature knots here. This little row of single crochet brings the square up to roughly the perfect 6-inch or 15-centimeter mark. Now, like any granny square pattern, you can always add more rows or fewer rows. So for example, if you wanted it bigger, you could add more rows of the shell stitch. Maybe you just want 1 more row of the shell stitch, but you want this row to be bigger. You could use double crochet or half double crochet instead of the single crochet if you wanted, if you were trying to make the square a little bit bigger. So there's nothing stopping you from doing that. It really does depend on the project you're doing and just exactly how big you need your squares. Or if you're using a lighter weight yarn, like a DK weight yarn, you might find that you just can't quite get the square up to the 6-inch mark, in which case you might find it very helpful to make this row of single crochet a taller stitch, like a double crochet. That might be just what you need to just bring it up to that 15 centimeter square mark. So lots of play here. And when you've finished your last single crochet, you're going to find the first single crochet you made, slip stitch into it to join, and then I'm going to pull out my 4 corners. I always like to use the heat of my hand to kind of block as I go. I find that helps. And that's it. My little corners poke out. I'm going to fasten off. Flip it over and weave in that tail. I always like to get my needle underneath some stitches first before I thread it up. There we go. So we've got 4 corners. We've got the top of a pumpkin, the bottom of a pumpkin, and now we definitely need a stem. So this isn't going to look much like a pumpkin until we get the little stem in. If you're making it into an apple instead, I'm going to talk about different stem options. So here we go. I've got some brown yarn for my stem. Now this is a pumpkin stem. I'm going to start with a slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to chain 4. I'm making a little kind of mini triangular shape, kind of not a perfect triangle, but just sort of a little pinched at the top and a little wider to the bottom. So I'm going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. So I'm going to skip the first chain, find the second one, and slip stitch into it. And then into the last 2 chains, I'm just going to half double crochet once in each chain. So a half double crochet in each chain, just to make the bottom a little thicker than the top. And that is going to be all I need for the stem. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail so I can sew it down, because this is acting like a little applique project. So that's it. Easy peasy. I'm going to take that little short tail and weave it in across the back underneath those 2 stitches.
Jayda, can you tell me why some people do granny squares without the stitch in between?
Yes. Even I do them that way sometimes. It depends on the kind of shape you're going for. So the chain 1 space in between shells is really great for granny squares where you're using a thicker weight yarn, maybe a bigger hook. It helps define the space in between the shells. So here's your shells and here's the space in between. It gives you kind of like breathing space. It helps really punch out that shell stitch pattern. If you don't use a chain 1 and you're using a thinner weight yarn and a smaller hook, you'll still obviously see that space between, but it'll be smaller. And that's a nice choice if you're making granny squares for, say, a baby blanket or something where you don't want a larger space, or you don't really want to see the spaces. So you can use the chain or not. It really just is kind of dependent on the pattern. Sometimes, you know, in order to get a granny square to size up or to lay nice and flat, especially when you're using a bigger hook and thicker yarn, that extra chain 1, in order to really help identify that space, also gives you more of a place to put your next 3 double crochets. So if you're working successive rows of granny shell stitch and you're looking for that space in between the shells and you're working 3 double crochet into it and your double crochets are thick, or your tension is large, at least you'll get that defined shell shape going. That isn't to say that you wouldn't get it working in between, you know, the space between 2 shells where there is no chain 1, but sometimes without the chain 1, it can make your shells just look a little bunched together. So it really does depend on the pattern, the yarn, your tension, the hook you're using. You don't have to add that chain 1 space unless you're making a specific pattern that calls for a granny square that uses that stitch. So for example, if you're making let's say you're making a set written pattern for a sweater or a blanket or something, and that pattern includes the granny square that's used in the overall pattern, you make that pattern using that granny square first, because the chances are, if there's a border or some kind of sizing involved, that little chain one space, as insignificant as it might seem at the time, is probably accounted for when you get to the point where you're putting on a border, or, you know, in terms of maybe if there's a gauge specific to that pattern. So that's why you'll sometimes see granny squares with 3 chains in the corner, 1 chain in the corner. It again really depends on the pattern, the yarn, the hook, the tension, all of that. So there are, I don't know, as many ways to make a granny square as there are people probably. I just really like that chain 1 space for a lot of the times that I use or make granny squares, because I feel it helps define that granny shell stitch pattern, and it doesn't make my stitches look bunched together, because I typically like to use a sort of a medium weight or even thicker weight yarn. So yeah, there's our little stem for our pumpkin, and I'm going to stitch it in right at the top where that little divot is. So I'm going to put it right there. Now, if you were making it into an apple, I would recommend chaining 4, slip stitching into the 2nd chain from the hook, just like we did with this one. But instead of using the half double crochet stitch, slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. So chain 4 and slip stitch into the bottom 3. And that will just make a skinny stem, much like you'd see on a real apple. And you can do the same thing. You can just like stitch it down. It'll just be skinnier. Another thing that makes it really look like an apple is if you want to add like a little bit of a leaf, you could embroider it on. You could make a little miniature green version of this. I would go slip stitch, half double crochet, slip stitch, and that will give you a tiny little leaf shape that you could applique on if you're making it into an apple, and that will definitely give it that apple-y look. I'm just going to hold my stem in place, and I'm going to slip stitch it, I should say whip stitch it on by picking up the loops of stitches that are nearby or right underneath. So loops of stitches of the pumpkin. So I've got my needle under the loop of a stitch, and now I'm going to go right through the edge of the stem, and this way I work this all the way around, so underneath the loop of the pumpkin, underneath the edge of the stem, pause to make sure it's not moving. When I do that, you don't see any stitches showing through to the back. So I did the same thing sewing on my little jack-o'-lantern pieces, the eyes and the mouth. I stitch using the top facing loops, and then you don't have any stitching showing through to the back. And it's a very neat way to add appliques to a square, because when you flip the blanket over, as you inevitably do, you have no mess on the back. So it's very neat and tidy. I'm just going to keep kind of repositioning my little stem and grabbing the top facing loops of stitches on the square. I'm making sure that my whip stitches are not loose, not super tight, but you don't want to see stitching along the edge. And again, nothing's showing through to the back. So I'm just going to do this all the way around. It's a very tiny little applique, so there might be like 9 little stitches to include here. Not a big deal. And when you get all the way back down to the beginning where you started, that's so cute. Make yourself a little knot. In this case, since it's so small, I'm going to put my needle right through and bring it out to the back because I've got some brown showing there. I'm just going to make sure that I bring it underneath the pumpkin stitches. I don't want it to show. There we go. So I've brought it through to the back. And because I've got a little bit of overlap with the stem, I'm just going to make a little knot back here on the back of the stem. You can also just knot it right on the front of the stem and weave it in through a few stitches on the front of the stem. But when you have the option of an applique covering over a little bit of a space on an existing granny square, like the big fancy grannies we did for the 2017 calendar blanket, this is a nice little option too, especially if you have trouble making a nice, tight, neat little knot. So just bring it through to the back if you can see the back of your applique, which of course you can just through some of those stitches there. And then you can, if it's a nice tight knot, you're not worried about it going anywhere, you can fasten off, you can snip it. I'm going to bring it back through to the other side. So my knot is on the back. So it's flush with the back. I've brought it back through my yarn to the front, and I'm just going to weave it underneath a couple of stitches. This is pretty grabby acrylic yarn. It's relatively thick, so not worried about it unraveling on me. So I'm only going to take it under a couple of stitches, and I'm going to trim what's left. So there's my little pumpkin. The pattern includes turning it into a jack-o'-lantern, a couple of triangles, and a little sort of triangular smiling mouth. But today I just really felt like making a pumpkin. I really love this for the autumn. I love pumpkins. They're so cheerful and happy. You can always block your squares before you join them or after you join them. If you don't really feel like your squares are that misshapen, there's no point in blocking them before you get them all joined into into the final project that you're planning on. Like I said, I think like 6 or 8 of these all stitched together would make a really cute little table runner. So the pumpkin, the jack-o'-lantern, and like I said, if you did this in green or red or yellow with a really narrow little stem, it makes a cute little apple square too. So there's that option as well. Yeah, I'm going to sip my coffee, and if anybody has any questions about today's little mini granny square, please let me know.
While you're taking a little sippy break there, can we see all the other mini squares you wrote up patterns for?
Absolutely. So there's my pumpkin and my jack-o'-lantern. We've got a little teddy bear. So these are all 6-inch squares. Like I said, using the hook and yarn that I used today, so medium size 4 yarn. I used acrylic, but you can use cotton, wool, blends, whatever you want. And a 5.5mm hook, also known as an I or a 9. So they work out to be 6 inches, but like I said, you could always add another row of the shell stitch. You could make your final border a taller stitch if you wanted. You don't just have to stick to the single crochet. You can use a little bit of play there if you're trying to make your squares a little bit bigger because you need to, because your yarn or hook or tension is a little tighter than mine. Or if you just want a slightly larger square for whatever project you're working on. I've also got a little frog. I love this. Same thing. We're stitching on little pieces like the appliques of the ears and the eyes and stuff, and nothing shows through to the back. So it's a very neat and tidy little project. Same thing with the cheeks and the mouth on my little frog. Nothing shows through to the back if you do all of the stitching using the top facing loops. So that's those little guys. And then we've also got a sunshine. I really had to do a sunshine. It's kind of a must for our channel, and a really pretty little flower. I love this flower. This is adorable as a really cute little sun on its own. This is a really cute little flower on its own. And the same thing with these guys. You can use the base of the middle of the granny square plus the appliques and have just the bear head, just the frog head. You don't have to turn it into the square, just like with this. You could also make the pumpkin shape and add the little applique stem at the top and just have the pumpkin. So if you wanted this as an applique, or you were making a larger project with the granny squares, but then you wanted an extra little kind of pop out applique piece, you can do that with all of these. So you can use just this as the pumpkin, the jack-o'-lantern, the teddy bear, and the little froggy, or same thing with the sun and our flower. So we've got these 5 little 6-inch granny square patterns available in our shop. They're 15% off as a little sort of like thanks for watching, sort of a sneaky sale. These are 15% off today and tomorrow, and thank you to anybody who's picked one up. I'm just sort of going through today's pattern, and I'm making a couple of little adjustments as I go. So our patterns are pretty much written exactly as we do them in the tutorials. But of course, when we're doing a tutorial, you'll hear me saying a lot of little extra details, like, oh, you might want to put your hook here, you might want to put your stitch there, you know, little tiny things that I find are helpful teaching mechanisms. So the pattern is the same, but the tutorial is always kind of helpful for just those little nuanced extras. And I thought it was fun to do a little tutorial on this. We don't have any tutorials for these little 6-inch grannies yet. And this was the first. So we did the pumpkin because, of course, it's pumpkin season. I really like that. And these all square up if you want to block them before you use them in a project, or get them into a project and then block them later. And they all square up nice and neat and tidy.
Big thank you to Nico for gifting another membership.
Thank you, Nico. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Nico. I really appreciate it. And Darcy. Darcy has won it. Welcome to the family, Darcy. I've got a couple sips left of my coffee. Are there any other questions? I'm going to...
making these squares into a hat. That's a couple of comments
Granny
here.
Square's hat, question mark, says Crocus. Yeah, so...
like a bucket hat, maybe?
You can easily turn Granny Squares into a hat. You... for a perfect fit, you probably want to work on the measurements of the head you're working for, but typically... 4 6-inch granny squares all stitched together in a row will be, if they're all 6 inches, they'll be 24 inches across. Now, if you've got a smaller head like mine, 22 inches, I would make these squares and leave off the little extra row of single crochet. That'll make them just a little bit smaller, and then you stitch them all together, and that'll probably give you the 22-inch circumference. You're going for a final measurement on your 4 grannies that will equal the circumference measurement of the head. So 22 inches is pretty common little head for adults like me, maybe teenagers. 23 to 24 inches is typical for excuse me, adults with larger heads or lots of hair. And that would be 4 6-inch granny squares altogether. Now, if it ends up being a little bit bigger, that's okay, because you can always make the cuff part of the hat a little tighter and then cheat these squares in to match it, just like you saw us do with a couple of the things when we joined the granny squares to the bottom of the sleeve in our cardigan live cowl. And then you just fill in the top. So you can create a circular granny. You could use another granny square if you wanted to, because when you put something that's square on a round body, it will round up. So easy way to turn those into a little granny hat if you wanted to. That's a good way to start if you've never turned granny squares into a hat. But maybe we'll do a granny square hat project here next Monday.
That's a pretty good idea.
You know, I like the idea of making a hat to match the cardigan, so maybe we'll do that.
Some people are asking, how do you get the mouth to make that shape?
The pattern includes the little bits to make it into the granny square jack-o'-lantern. So you're basically just making a couple of triangle shapes for the eyes and 3 triangles in a row built on just a kind of a row of chains. So you're making a little, you chain a length, and then you're making a little triangle, and then another little triangle on top, and another little triangle on top. It's not that difficult. It's included in the pattern. And then the trick is when you're sewing on appliques, like you always see me doing, I kind of do a couple stitches and then I pause and I rearrange it. You're bending it a little bit into a smile. So you could also turn it into a frown if you wanted, or just leave it straight. But you have some play when you're adding. That's another reason I like to add appliques onto projects to kind of complete the look. It's because you get to sort of, you know, if you want to put this ear a little more to the side, or maybe a little up higher, maybe, you know, just sort of turn it inwards a little bit. Maybe you want your eyes a little further set, or maybe closer together. You you can kind of hold it in place and stitch, and then just keep kind of rearranging it as you go.
I like the applique on top. It kind of pops the image out.
It does.
You know, that little slightly more 3D.
Yeah, it makes it a little more alive.
A little more alive, a little more playful.
It gives it a bit of texture. Yeah.
Jessica Rabbit would like to see a cat face.
A cat face.
Don't we have a cat face one?
We have a 12-inch cat granny square.
We don't have the mini version.
We don't have a mini. No, these are all the minis we've got so far. So there's 5 of them. This is a single pattern. So just leaving it as a pumpkin or turning it into a granny square jack-o'-lantern, that's all in the same little pattern. And like I said, you could easily make this to the apple if you wanted to just make a narrower stem and change the color. So lots of opportunity with that little pattern. Nice and easy. That's why we thought we would do a tutorial on it today. I love 6-inch grannies. I think that's like my sweet spot for granny squares. I like the big ones too, because they, you know, they're fun, they're large. You'd make fewer of them and still have a large size blanket, but there's just something super adorable about little 6-inch granny squares.
Speaking of super, we have a super chat from Deanna S.
Hi, Deanna. Thank you so much for the super chat. How big is the flamingo square? I would love to use the flamingo on a poodle skirt. The flamingo square is a 12-inch granny. So the center of that flamingo is a little bit bigger than this pumpkin. So the body's a little bit bigger. And then everything is kind of like scaled to that, but the whole thing fits inside of an 11.5-inch granny square. So that that flamingo standing, if you only used its pieces as an applique, would stand about 10 inches tall, I guess. I think Crystal asked me to make that square, that flamingo granny square. We did that. A couple years ago, we added the flamingo. I love that one. It's cute. Flamingos are such pretty birds.
Dawn asks if we have any unicorns.
Yes, we do.
I seem to recall a unicorn. Yeah. Is that the bigger squares?
We have a 12-inch fancy granny unicorn.
Yes,
we have a 12-inch.
There is a unicorn, Dawn.
We've got...
It's a 12-inch square.
24 or... We've got like 24 or almost 30 12-inch fancy granny squares. We've got... lots of animals. We've got a flamingo, an owl. We've got a bat for Halloween. We've even got a little Frankenstein. We've got, oh golly, a rabbit. We've got a teddy bear. We've got a frog prince. He even has a little crown. So he's like a bigger version of him, but he's got a little crown. We've got a lot of different animals. We've got a Christmas ball. If you're wondering, you can pop over to our Etsy shop and click on the Granny Squares section and just scroll through it. They're all there. We've got so many I can't even think of them all on the top of my head. But I do know that we've got a larger version of the pumpkin and jack-o'-lantern. So that's a 12-inch granny. We have a 12-inch of him. We've got a 12-inch of him. We've got a 12-inch sunshine, and we even have a 12-inch. We have 2 12-inch flowers. We've got a flower that's constructed very much like this one, and we also have a 12-inch chrysanthemum that has like real textured, because we've added a whole bunch of rows of textured flower petals that come out of it. Yeah, lots of different versions of that. And if you are interested in any of these patterns, Mel, I see your question. You can click on the link to our Etsy shop up at the top of the chat. We also will probably have it in the description box. And you can pop over there and take a look. All of our little mini granny squares, our 6-inch fancy grannies, there's these 5 are on sale, 15% off today and tomorrow if you want to pick one up. And all of our 12-inch squares are there as well. If you want additional help on doing any of these 12-inch, the big fancy ones, please feel free to check out our entire playlist of our 12-inch fancy granny square series. It was our 2017 calendar blanket. Mr. InStitches curated them all over on the calendar blanket page of our website if you want to check that out, or you can just sort of search for them on our channel homepage here. We also had additional ones. We did a cute little chick. Oh, that's another one we have. We have a chick, a cheerful chick. And we included the chick and the bunny in a baby blanket pattern. So if you would just like those two, we have them in a special baby blanket pattern in our shop. And we also have a tutorial for that. We've got tutorials for so we've got tutorials for at least 13. Oh, we have a turkey. We have a big turkey square. We have a lot of animals. So we have 13 fancy granny square tutorials here on the channel. And all of the techniques included in all of those granny squares are explained in at least one, if not many, of those tutorials. So if you want to pick up a pattern that doesn't have a tutorial for it, then all of the little odds and ends or questions that you might have about that pattern, A, you can ask us, just message us at the shop, or B, we can definitely direct you to one of the tutorials that will help answer the questions, because they're all made using the same general concept.
Do you recall how to find that area that says allow memberships or allow membership gifting?
Yes, so every single time someone buys a gift in the membership gift in the chat, and then it's awarded, underneath that that big green square that says, Nico purchased a membership gift, you should see a little message that says in blue, allow gifts on this channel. So if you've clicked on that, you won't see it. But if you haven't clicked on it, you'll see in blue, allow gifts. And if you click on that, it will allow you to be in the running for winning a membership on the channel. But you have to be signed in to your YouTube account in order to do that. And then the algorithm will figure out, the algorithm kind of hands out gifted memberships based on your subscription status. So if you're subscribed to the channel, you'll be eligible to win. And then after that, it's like, how many hours you've got in watching the channel. And there's a few other things that the algorithm does it. But I do know you have to be signed in and you do have to be subscribed in order to win. That's as much as I know about the algorithm, the little magical that's sort of how it delegates who gets an award. But you do have to have that turned on, allow gifts. And then I think if you go into the other way, if you're not watching while it's live, if you go to the channel homepage by clicking on our name, Jayda InStitches, and then click on memberships, it should be down in there somewhere if you sort of scroll through that membership tab.
These are not part of the 2017 calendar blanket, which we call fancy granny squares. Those are the 12-inch. These are the 6-inch mini granny squares that we have in the Etsy shop.
Yeah, this is part of a little collection of fancy mini grannies or fancy little grannies that I've been working on. I've been working on making a miniature version of all of the super large ones that we have. So we do have a lot of really big, fancy 12-inch grannies. And like I said, we've got tutorials for 13 of them here on the channel. And this is the first fancy mini granny square tutorial that we've done today. We thought we would do the little pumpkin because all of these guys, especially these guys, are built using the same kind of concept. These really aren't any different. It's just the middle that changes up a little bit. So the patterns are pretty specific, but I thought if you were interested in picking up one of these patterns, now there's a tutorial here to kind of help guide you through the process, because this is a little bit different than our 12-inch grannies, where I like to sort of square it up by creating that little row of chain 3 spaces so that you've got a really clear place to work your first row of granny shell stitch into. And I really like how it makes the centerpiece stand out. I think it looks really cool. Cheryl asks if we've ever thought of printing up books. Oh, heck yeah. We've definitely thought of printing up books. Finding a printer and getting that kind of thing done is probably easier in the US than it is here in Canada. We just don't have as many options here in Canada as we do in the US.
It's also 5 times more expensive.
It's also
in Canada
insanely expensive.
No reason.
Yeah, we'd have to, if we were printing up books and doing like what they call vanity publishing, because you're printing up your own little book and you're putting up the money for it, we'd have to charge a ridiculous amount of money per book. So we have ebooks.
Maybe we should try and source out a US printer.
Yeah, maybe. We've got ebooks for a lot of our larger projects available in our Etsy shop. So you can buy the ebook and you can just keep it on any of your devices and just sort of read it like you would any kind of, like a Kindle style book. You can read them that way, or you can print them off if you want. You can print them off at home, or you can always take the file on your phone or a USB key to a print shop, and they can print it for usually a pretty decent rate. So those are always options too. Regina, hi Regina. Regina with a membership milestone. Regina's been a member for 3 months. Says, lurking longer. You are such a natural teacher. Thank you. Without effort, you explain every step. I love the lives. Thank you and Mr. Well, thank you for being here, Regina. I'm really glad you could make it. I love doing these lives. I really like being able to do a tutorial in real time. I love our Friday videos too. It's easier to sometimes film a project but edit it down to all of its important bits, so you don't sort of have to see me, doing all of the stitches in a circle. But I don't know, sometimes I think being able to just sit and watch something come together stitch by stitch is really helpful. Yeah, even if you've been crocheting a long time, sometimes just seeing something come together. I know I feel this way. I love to watch real-time sewing projects because I've been sewing since I was 14, but I'm still learning new things and new techniques just by watching people sew in real time. I go, oh, that's a smart idea.
We do have, like, our ebooks are set up a bit more like a book, and if you print them out or take them to a library or like a Kinko's or a UPS or whatever you have in your area, you can get them printed out, and then you can buy those. They're these clear little sheets, like you can get them at stores like Staples or Office Depot or whatever you have. And then they have this little spine, so you can put the paper in the plastic sheets, and then you can slide the spine, and it kind of polishes it up, makes it look like a little book. So we've done that in the past, and that actually turns out pretty good.
Yes.
And it's not very expensive to have stuff printed out.
It's not.
If you go to Staples, it's like, I don't know, 5 cents a page or
yeah,
something.
it's pretty
really
cheap.
Really cheap.
I'll also say too, if we were to get a printer here in Canada to print our books, if we were also then going to ship them to you in the US, you're looking at like an additional $15 for shipment. Like it's Canada is so backwards when it comes to trying to support small business. I mean, like I feel like we've probably been screaming about this most of our lives, and it's not something we talk about much on the channel because it's boring. But Canada does not support small business. They put as much.
Canada's really good at crushing small business.
They put as much red tape and as much expense in the way as possible. In the US, it constantly boggles my mind at how people are just like, you know what, I'm going to start a theme park, and somebody just does. You find the people to do it. People then come. It's like, wow. Here in Canada, it's, you really have to be driven, and you have to have people that are really hopeful to support you behind you in order to get anywhere. Because it's just ludicrously expensive. So even if we found a publisher and we were able to get the books printed for a relatively good price, because most of the people who like to hang out with us are in the States, who would probably want a book, we'd have to include shipping in like a pre-order price, and you're looking at like I said, it would just be an exorbitant amount. So we are still looking into it. It's not something we've given up on, and maybe if we find an American printer, that might fix a few problems.
If anyone out there knows of any reasonable printers in the US that also drop ship, then we would happily partner up with someone that knows what they're doing and then ship from the US. Because that would probably work out better for like price wise for everybody.
I would absolutely love to have some physical book copies of some of the stuff that we've done. I think that's like literally a bucket list dream. So yeah, if anybody knows, if anybody in this, any publisher in the States that will do something like that, then please let us know. Message us at the Etsy shop, and we'll definitely look into it, because we would love to do that. People have been asking for like a physical book for quite a while, and we've just felt like we've been kind of banging our head against the wall. So thank God for the Etsy shop in the meantime, yeah, if you do know of anybody, let us know. We'll totally take a look at that.
Danny says that Amazon does that, and they are reasonable. They actually do physical printed books and binding? Or I thought they were just sort of like digital Kindle, that Amazon Kindle stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. Do they actually do that? Like
Amazon
book binding?
KDP prints on demand and ships it to wherever.
I wonder if that's available to us here. We'll have to look into that.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that to see if it's available here. But sure, we could look into that.
That'd be so cool. And believe me, if we manage to get to that point, we will be barking about it for weeks. Excitedly. Whee! Okay, guys, I think we're going to call it there for our Monday live stream. Thank you so much for hanging out. Feel free to pop into the shop and take a look at some of the other big fancy grannies if you're new to fancy grannies in general, or you never sort of did the 2017 calendar blanket along with us. And of course, these little guys are there. We've got 4 of them up front. So if you land in the Etsy shop, you'll see the 4 of them up front, including our little pumpkin that we did today. The little mini grannies are, these 5 patterns are 15% off today and tomorrow. So if you wanted to pick one up out of curiosity, then today and tomorrow is a good day to do that. And past that, thanks for hanging out. We will see you Friday. And in the meantime, feel free to leave comments down below. Pop into the shop and message us if you have any questions about any of the patterns that we do. And have a great week. I hope you guys stay nice and cozy and just sort of enjoy the fall as it floats over top of us. Or if you're on the other side of the planet, welcome spring. I love fall, but I'm also a little envious that you guys are kind of heading into your summer already, because I don't quite feel ready to let go of my summer yet. I'm not looking forward to winter. Anything you'd like to add, mister?
Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah.